Good morning and welcome back to the Vision Alignment Show, where we all know the importance of having our core beliefs, our core strengths aligned with our vision. Wow. So this show has really taken a turn. It's incredible where we've gone from. But I want to tell you a little bit about what we did this weekend. So my wife and I, we went to Cincinnati not to the football game, but we went to see my oldest son, Grant, and his wife, Jade. We had a great time. And then on Saturday, we had another good event where we just, what did we do? We had some work I needed to get done then on Saturday, but that evening we went to dinner with some friends or some family members. So we had a great time. There's so much goodness that comes from recharging and resting, getting through the weekend, not just getting through the weekend, but getting to the weekend and having a great time of relaxation. So I want to make sure that I told you a little bit about that, because it's important for us all to know how to recharge ourselves and take care of ourselves. You know, we've got a great show lined up for you today, and I'm looking forward to this show and many more shows like it, where we're going to be talking about disabilities and how important it is to understand those disabilities are not things that prevent you from doing something, but they actually allow you to see what you should be doing. So we have a special guest coming on today. He is someone that he knows a lot about disabilities. He knows what it means to use your disabilities for good. Without any further ado, I'm going to bring on our guest today, Mr. Anthony Frisina. Anthony, how are you?
Brian, how are you?
I'm wonderful.
Awesome, especially after that Cincinnati win over the weekend, eh?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm a Bengals fan right now. I'm not normally a Bengals fan, but yeah. So
awesome.
Good.
Awesome.
What a great game.
Yes, sir.
So how have you been?
Doing all right, thank you.
Yeah.
It's a nice balmy -11 here in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada.
-11 Fahrenheit?
-11, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And we're expecting more snow this week. That's what I just heard. So we're bracing for it.
Huh. Okay. And you're virtual, right? Do you go into school at all?
I work virtually right now through various resources and outlets that I have in my community. Mm-hmm. So really having and being able to work virtually has really been a benefit for me as a member of the disability community.
Okay. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your experience in the disability community? And I'm actually gonna go to the green room myself while you go into that.
Absolutely. Well, thanks, Brian. So I'm an author, actor, speaker, and consultant on accessibility and inclusion from Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. I created the brand Above and Beyond, bridging the gap to accessibility and inclusion. Started as being given the opportunity to host a TV show locally entitled Above and Beyond, and it really just catapulted from there. In 2016, I unfortunately lost my mom, and so that really kind of amplified the message and the meaning behind what I do, and as the purpose for continuing the drive to really build Above and Beyond, build its brand and its purpose and identity, and helping to bridge the gap to accessibility and inclusion. Over 1.1 billion people identify as members of the disability community worldwide. So it's important that we be recognized as people first. We be recognized for our abilities and the opportunities to create an impact and an allyship worldwide.
Yeah. No, I love that. It makes a lot of sense. And the 1.5 billion people with disabilities. I mean, so where does that number come from? I mean, is it external disabilities, internal disabilities, more than that?
It's visible, invisible disabilities, all numbers based on the censuses that are calculated for the various countries worldwide. And not every country does calculate the census. So we have reason to believe and speculate that that number is even greater than that 1.5.
Hmm. Wow, that's amazing. Um, we got some guests on here today, and if you're on as well, please put a hashtag live. If you're listening live, if you're listening on replay, put a hashtag replay so we know where you are and that you are there, and where you're coming in from as well. Let us know if you are in the great state of Ohio, or if you happen to be elsewhere. That's quite all right. I know Anthony's coming in from Canada, and it looks like we have. Jane McGinnis is on the line. So thank you very much for putting that in there, Jane. I appreciate you doing that. Jane McGinnis Thomas. Thank you. Now, Anthony, so you told us a little bit about your mom and how the foundation you have kind of started from there with Above and Beyond. What did your mom do in this world?
So I was born with spina bifida and hydrocephalus, and that looked very different for me at different stages growing up to the man that I am today. So as a kid, I spent numerous times in the hospital, going through appointments, having multiple surgeries, trying to solidify the stance of just being able to continue to grow and live a life. So I had about 7 surgeries by the time I was 12 years old. But the climactic surgery that I had at 12 years old was a surgery where I was walking at the time, using a cane, using crutches, braces, etc. But that surgery in '92 had a success rate of 40%. And thereon after, I have been using a wheelchair. But that's not a negative, Brian. That's simply an opportunity. And I simply have felt a lot of gratitude toward just being able to live and wanting to be able to give back to the community that's given me the opportunity to live a life that I'm choosing to live right now. And it's just about coming together and building that allyships and those relationships. And now we're starting to through the virtual world, being able to meet people like you through our mutual friend there. And then it just kind of continues to go from there. And gratitude is really a huge part of why I do what I do.
Hmm. So the surgery that you're supposed to have had a 40% success rate. Obviously, it didn't go well, right? So you've been in a wheelchair since then. What was entailed in that surgery? What were they supposed to be doing?
So I'm gonna say, Brian, it's not that it did or didn't go well.
Oh,
It went the way it was meant to go. That's the way I'd like to view it. So basically, I had cysts along my spinal cord that needed to be removed, and it was to the lower spine, and one unfortunately popped, and the particles were so small that it was becoming more and more dangerous to remove those particles. So again, that left me using a wheelchair there on after, but again, it was really about being at being given that opportunity to be grateful. I remember after that surgery, my spinal cord was taped and stitched up and whatnot, and I shot up out of the bed, and I really wasn't supposed to. The nurses were like, "What the heck is he doing?" And I just that was just my nature. So I kind of felt the pain afterwards, after shooting up. So the nurses had to bring me back down to in a lying down position. So it's about moving forward for me, understanding and identifying what I'm able to do within my community and helping to make a difference.
hmm. Yeah, that's a great way of looking at it. That's impressive. What have you done differently since that time?
Well, you know what? It's about finding what's my normal. A normal day of life. In a house of 5 at the time, I was living upstairs, which a bedroom needed to be made for me on the main floor. I would have to not really stairs would identify for me as a kryptonite, so to speak.
Hmm.
So it was really about finding what worked for me, what was most accessible, how I could get the job done, how I could continue to grow, how I could continue to be Anthony the person rather than Anthony the guy that uses the wheelchair. So it may look unorthodox to an uneducated eye, but essentially that's my normal. And, and the educational piece, the alleviating attitudinal piece, is essentially a big part of Above and Beyond.
So eliminating attitudinals. And tell me a little bit more about that.
Pardon me, right? So a lot of people, tend to want to believe people with disabilities are on a lower tier than our counterparts in the able-bodied society, in the able-bodied community, whether you identify as a visible or invisible disability. And that's not the case at all. I'm choosing to do things to ensure that people with disabilities are on a level playing field. Whether that means kind of being a radical, whether that means throwing caution to the wind and showing people what I can do prior to them believing what I can't, based on the premise of disability.
So changing attitudinals, I like that. What other changes have you made in your day-to-day life?
Well, it's again alleviating the stereotype and the stigma of ableism and discrimination. Nobody lives the life that I live. The old cliche is walk a mile in their shoes kind of thing, but you don't know how to tie my own laces. I know how to tie my laces. So it is about showing people that perspective, and it's showing people that we're all people and that we have a life that we choose to live. And the barrier and the stereotype of, well, you can't do this based on a liability, or you can't do this based on our perception, is false, consequentially.
Yeah, so and this is interesting because I see myself in this as well. Where I work and how I transport, I take a bus, and it's a disabilities bus. So that allows me to be able to get around a lot. But I'm wondering, from your perspective, and you work at the university, and then now you also do a lot more remotely. What other, I guess, what do you think is the biggest challenge for people that have disabilities in their workforce?
I just think a lot of it's being strong enough to own your voice, and not be content with the pushback from society to say, well, you have a disability, so you only are able to live on this plateau. We decide what our plateaus are. We have the opportunities, and given the power of accommodation, the power of now doing things virtually, we have more and more opportunities that otherwise weren't available pre-pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
But now that we're also more so working to continue to live on a level playing field, we have to continue to bridge that gap. We have to continue to amplify one another in allyship to create that collective prosperity.
No, that's good. When is the first time you really recognized that there was some sort of a prejudice going on, or some? Do you remember that time where you felt like it was kind of weird?
Oh my gosh, absolutely. It happens more often than you think. But the way I approach it, pardon me, the way I approach it, Brian, is I try to beat people to the punch. If I perceive an attitudinal barrier is going to come my way, or something that's going to be stigmatic or stereotypical toward disability and whatnot, and the perception of me and my abilities, I'm just going to just go my own merry way. Like whether it's wheeling up a ramp that I'm not supposed to without help, or just doing something that I can do without assistance, I'm going to do it. And then they're saying, well, how did you do that? Well, I have the ability to do that. And that's important to remember, that everybody with a disability has different abilities, and we have to take an abilities focused approach to allowing everybody to live the life that we want to live, rather than something that is dictated to us by a handout, something that's dictated to us by a policy that really puts limits on the quality of life that we want to live.
I'm still struggling with this. Trying to make sure that we're doing the right thing. I'm doing the right thing for my audience in terms of helping them understand. Disabilities is not something that prevents people from living the life that they want to live. disabilities is simply a part of our life and a part of who we are and a part of how we do what we do. And yeah, so I mean, how do I help help people to understand that?
Absolutely. Well, you know what? A lot of times in my community, that I'm faced with barriers that don't allow me to utilize my independence that I have, my independence, my integrity, my respect, and whatnot. And I have to push the envelope, so to speak, because we all have different abilities. I won't get into specific details about it, but a lot of it does take away from living the quality of life that we need, that we want to have. Getting the accommodations that we need, getting the accommodations that we need in proper time frames. Not getting something that you need in 2 weeks, for example, when somebody without a disability can get it like right away. Do you know what I'm trying to say there?
Yeah, well, when you need accommodations, yeah. For example, if I'm taking the bus and I need to have the bus here at a certain time because I have a meeting at a certain time. I need to have that bus here, and the bus has to be able to. For you, it would have to have wheelchair access. But I mean, for me, I just need a bus, really.
Well, yeah,
Um,
that's the thing. Like, I mean, and you just spoke to another big thing here. Getting to where we need to be when we need to be there. It's wasting time in the sense of the semblance of, well, if you need a particular vehicle to be where you need to be, you'll need to have an hour in advance notice, and that's
mhm.
not right. Like, we should have more on-demand services, like the able-bodied counterparts, so that we're not wasting our time, or we're not, a bus is not being late, for example.
Yeah. So I know you've done a lot with legislators and other notable lawyers there in Ontario.
Yep.
How are you doing that with reaching out to them?
Well, you know what? I'm just promoting my advocacy, promoting my brand, promoting my passion to cultivate change. Fundamental systemic and cultural change in abundance is really what's important, that helps bridge the gap to access and inclusion, and amplifies the allyships and the importance for allyships for people with disabilities. Uh, in Hamilton, the percentage of persons with disabilities is greater than the provincial and national averages. So we have an audience here in our city. We have an audience of change makers in our city. Over 1.9 million people in Ontario identify as members of the disability community. We have about 22% of Canadians that identify as members of the disability community. We are the largest minority group worldwide, and we are the only disability demographic that has a fluctuation rate. Disability can happen to anyone at any time, whether it be temporary, permanent, or catastrophic. So being proactive rather than reactive is important to cultivating this change. You know, we need to think of accessibility and inclusion at the forefront of conversation, Brian, rather than retrofitting it into conversation. From the standpoint of, let's look at a building, for example. You have a new build, but it's not accessible. To retrofit accessibility into a building costs more than if you did the building with accessibility in mind from the beginning.
Right.
According to the Rick Hansen Foundation, which is a huge foundation here in Canada, the cost to build a new building with accessibility features to their gold standard is 1% more of the actual cost to the building, rather than retrofitting accessibility into a current build.
So it's 1% more to make
Yep.
things accessible than just a regular building.
Right. No, no. It's 1% more to the cost of a new build to
Mhm.
make things accessible,
Yeah.
as opposed to the cost of a current building to build accessibility into a current build.
Yeah. So how much more would it be to do that into a current build?
Significantly more.
Yeah.
It is significantly more to build accessibility into
Mhm.
a current build, because you have to identify structures that are already in place, as opposed to those structures not being in place when the building has not been built yet. Do you know what I mean?
Oh
You
yeah.
can build accessibility into something that you have the blueprint and the framework beforehand so that you can identify those areas and create the solution.
Hmm. I wonder, are there other breaks available, or not breaks? I mean, other options available for people with disabilities to be able to go into buildings or to go into homes or own different facilities like that?
Well, accessibility means a lot of things to different people. So,
Mhm.
what's accessible to me versus the universal accessible framework are different. Quite frankly, Brian, we're struggling. We do need to continue to have more accessible homes, more universally designed commercial buildings that take accessibility into the forefront of conversation. We're doing a lot of retrofitting right now, and
Mhm.
we need to change the culture to more of uh, approach that we have to think about it from the beginning. You know,
So, do you start with architects and designers, and I'm not sure who else do you start with?
well, you start with architects and you start with designers. We have our guidelines. You have the ADA guidelines. We have the AODA guidelines. But I also think that it's important to have people with lived experience as part of the project, as part of the overhaul, to see things that we can make more accessible and more inclusive.
Hmm. So I'm assuming you sit on some sort of a board where you have conversations with people and help them to understand your disabilities and how it affects you from an accessibility perspective. Are there other people that you have around in your circle that help to make make the voice heard for their
Well,
disabilities?
I am on our city's advisory committee for persons with disabilities. I also sit on the board for Path Employment Services, which is an employment agency for persons with disabilities, as well as the Canadian Cancer Association Hamilton branch for not Canadian Cancer, Catholic Children's Aid Society
Mm,
board of directors as well. And it's about getting that message on accessibility and inclusion out there so that we can be more mindful and proactive rather than reactive. Let's talk about the snow, for example. We just had Snowmageddon here about a week ago.
mhm.
So to get around was atrocious. I had to stay in because the reaction times for snow removal are not where they need to be. And we're planning on another snowstorm this week. So we need to be more understanding of people's lives and how we need to live our lives. For example, the sidewalks weren't cleared properly, bus shelters weren't cleared, curbs weren't cleared properly, and we had an abundance of snow, and I get it. And like more often than not, there's nowhere to put it, but you have to put it in safe places so that all persons, can travel safely.
Right. Right, and getting that message of how important that is. I mean, that's can be an uphill battle at times.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
The cities have or are mandated now in Ontario and in Canada to clear the snow. But if you clear the snow, for example, with a millimeter, 2 millimeters to the cement or to the pavement, you don't account for the fact that below those millimeters of snow there could be a patch of ice
Right.
and something could happen to somebody, and you want to be mindful of that. You want to be mindful of clearing things to the cement, to the concrete, and putting things out of the way so that all travelers have enough space to get around safely.
Yeah. Um, so that's a little bit about snow and winter effects. I mean, what other things do we need to? And we talked about buildings. We talked about snow removal. What other areas do we not think about that are some areas that need to be dealt with?
Well, we talked about it a little bit before, Brian, but I'll touch back on it again. It's the educational piece. It's alleviating the attitudes on behalf of people with disabilities. Like I
Mhm.
said, we're people first, and we need to be more mindful of that. We need to educate our communities that disability is not a negative; it's an opportunity for growth. It's an opportunity for people to learn. Disability can happen to anyone at any time, like I mentioned earlier. So we need to be more mindful of that conversation during mainstream conversation rather than afterthoughts. And in terms of accommodations, we need to have a lot of accommodations preset in our meetings, preset in our events, preset in our engagements with the members of the community, so that we're felt to be made members of our community.
Yeah. I would agree with you 100% there. Anthony, this has been a great conversation. I cannot believe our time has just eroded.
Time's up already? I can go another hour, Brian. Let's go.
Well, you're coming back, man.
I'll be there, Brian. You just say the word and I'm here.
All right. Sounds good, Anthony. So, Anthony, tell us how we can find out more about you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Brian. I'm on Facebook at Anthony Frisina. My book is there on Amazon. You can reach me on Instagram at Above and Beyond Media. Mm-hmm. I'm all over the place. You can't miss me.
All right. Tell us about your book.
Absolutely. My book is my memoir, basically. Mm-hmm. Growing up, I touched on a few of the stories in the book with my growth and having that surgery, but just being able to live as Anthony the person with the support that I dictated that I needed and that I continue to dictate that I need. And it's important just to understand and what I'll allude to a little bit is the MICE principles of my way of teaching my community, which is motivation, innovation, inspiration, celebration, education, and empowerment. You know, I'm one person, but it takes a village to really create the importance of accessibility and inclusion at the forefront of conversation and not an afterthought. And that's really where we need to go. And then I'm in the process of starting my own podcast, which I hope you'll be a guest on it soon, Brian.
Absolutely.
So sounds great. And then I've got a children's book coming out about belonging. So as a kid, you know, I really had to find the semblance of belonging. And I found that at a very young age. So I was so happy to get that kind of confident mindset to know that despite a disability, I was going to be Anthony. And that's the way I always wanted to be. So that's coming out soon. And so Brian, thank you so much. It's been great.
Yeah. What's the name of the children's book?
It's going to be called Because I Belong.
Because I Belong. I love it. Awesome.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for being on today, Anthony.
Brian, thanks so much. Great to talk to you again.
All right, hey, I'm gonna let you go in the green room. I'm gonna be right back. So I'm just gonna close out the show. So don't go anywhere.
I won't.
All right. Sounds good. Yep. I'm sorry, I cut you off.
Nope. Thank you, Brian. Take care.
Bye. Anthony Frisina. He is the man. I love it. That's a great conversation we had when it comes to disability. So really, that's where the show is going. We're going to continue to have more conversations about disabilities and how disabilities need to be included in the world. How we can make the world a better place if we are inclusive of those people with disabilities, because that is where my core strengths, my core beliefs, my core values go. And I want to make sure that I'm aligned with my vision. So I appreciate you all being on today. If there's ever any questions, let me know. You know, and we'll just continue to have great conversations with all of you. Hopefully, you all are having a safe and warm January, but we're almost to February already. I mean, oh my gosh, it's going by quick. So thank you very much for being on. I appreciate you. And as always, take care and keep one eye on the road.